Hello, hello. Welcome to the PG-ish podcast. I'm Erin with your parental guidance to help you grow yourself as a parent and raise healthy, happy, and successful humans. Before we jump in today, I'd love your support by sharing PG-ish with your bestie, your kids' teachers, your mom, your dog, or even the person in line in front of you when you get coffee. Because if you love PG-ish, you know, the inspiration and information to become a better adult and parent, or perhaps maybe because you just love me, I'd really appreciate the extra shout out or review on your favorite podcast platform. Not only will you be helping your friend evolve alongside their kiddo, but you'll also be helping me reach more people. So, seems like a win-win situation, don't you think? Many, many thanks in advance. So after you go give us a 5-star rating, come back and enjoy the show. All right, let's dive in. I admit, nearly every morning when I drop off my kiddos at school, I wonder what they're going to learn that day. Since school looks wildly different these days, I feel out of the loop quite frequently. There is very little homework, no at-home projects, and everything is online. And not to date myself or anything, but basically I took a how to use the internet class my sophomore year of high school. So yeah, I feel not only ancient, but most definitely not savvy. Heck, my 4th grader showed me a PowerPoint she presented the other day. And yes, it was rudimentary, but honestly, I don't think I did my first PowerPoint until college. So there's that. But aside from wondering what the heck they're learning, I know they also are missing out on some fundamental skills that I'll have to teach them at home, like finances and entrepreneurship, among other things, of course. And as someone who loved school and couldn't wait to go to college for various reasons, I believe our education is failing our kids in some regard. At least here in the US, of course. Now, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on my beliefs, though, because we have Jeffery Jay Luhn as a guest today to share his experience with art education and the importance of it in the classroom. Jeffery is a veteran of 50 years as a professional photographer, author of 4 books, and a working jazz musician. Currently, he's also a college professor and a self-described art activist. I trust you'll enjoy our conversation. Thanks for being on PG-ish today. I'm coming off of a weekend conference surrounded by hundreds of incredibly talented and creative people, so I'm excited to talk to you today about the importance of art education in the life of a child. But first, I always like to know a little bit more of the backstory of my guests. So since life isn't linear, I have no doubt that there are plenty of steps to get you to where you are today. Could you share a few of the milestones, Jeff, that ultimately helped you on this path to where you are?
Well, yes. Thanks for having me, Erin. You know, I came from a family of artists. My mother was a very good painter, and both my brother and sister could draw very well. But I was not born with the drawing gene. My mother, bless her heart, didn't want me to feel left out, so she bought me a camera when I was about 7. This was in the age of film, and I racked up some major expenses. Then she decided that a musical instrument would be a one-time expense, so she bought me a guitar. I was the only musician in my family, and for anyone that has kids, you'll know how important it is for every child to be recognized for their individual talents. Mm-hmm. And the guitar, that was really good. So her support of my creativity set the course for my life, both in my career as a commercial photographer and as a semi-professional jazz musician. I was the youngest photographer ever hired by United Press International, which was the biggest news agency in the world when I started at age 17. Besides shooting for UPI, I was asked to write for them. First, it was just captions, but eventually I wrote short news pieces. My first assignment was to photograph and write about the hippie invasion of Europe in the 1970s, and I had just turned 17 then. It was a great assignment from what I can remember.
Yeah.
On the music side, I played instruments in school and have gotten enjoyment playing and recording soundtracks for commercial videos I've produced for Sony, Apple, Microsoft, and other clients. I'm very fortunate to have been introduced to the arts at a young age.
Yeah, shout out to your mom, right? No pressure on us moms to get those kids started young.
That is the truth, yes.
Definitely set you on the journey of an exciting life, no doubt. But you do have a lot of job descriptions. So what's up with that? And why are you so passionate about getting children involved in art?
Well, a dear family friend once told me, figure out what you love doing and find someone to pay you to do it. And that's really good advice. And every kid loves art, and art interleaves with so many different disciplines. And that leads me to the reason I'm pushing for a country to get back into supporting arts education for young people. All of the arts contribute to gaining mastery of core academic subjects, not just art. The growth of brain function, mental mapping, memory, concentration, creativity, and problem solving is greatly enhanced through art. And art is enjoyable. And by the nature of pursuing art in school, it enlivens kids' interest in other disciplines like science and math. It gets your brain going. The growth of brain function and mental mapping is really important. Researchers tell us that spending time in artistic pursuits is great exercise for our brains, especially when we're young. Creating the mental pathways that will become our mental highways as adults, it starts in kindergarten. Tactile and audio development is especially important in our age of online communications. We need to get kids thinking in creative ways to help realize their goals and keep America in a leadership position with innovations in science, medicine, filmmaking, engineering, and other brain-intensive tasks.
I agree with all of that. But you did say something about supporting the arts. Did we ever really support the arts? Like, who's really doing that? Because I don't feel like it's happening in our schools very much.
Well, since you've been a student, you probably were part of a big decline in supporting the arts. I read a disturbing fact in the Wall Street Journal article today by Troy Clausen. 51% of students in the 3rd through the 8th grade in New York City get a failing grade in reading. Yeah, that's more than half of every student in the largest school system in our country. New York was the number one school system when I was a kid in the 1960s. So how has this happened? New York started defunding art programs in favor of core teaching around 1970. Now I'm talking about in the public schools because they have, wonderful private schools. Right. But they started defunding art around 1970, and they've been stressing, STEM and core courses. But abandoning art, it just hasn't worked out well. There are a lot of reasons, and cell phone use was cited as the major problem in this article. But it is related to defunding of art. I'm not saying that you should support art at the expense of core studies, but I am saying that what people do on screens, especially young people, screens are passive and art is active, and it makes a big difference in a child's brain to be active. And America was a world leader in art education up until 1970. We were only surpassed by the Soviet Union. That's right. The evil empire, the Russian Empire, has always valued the arts and still does. Common people in Russia have a keen appreciation for opera, plays, painting, poetry, and literature. They are also very literate and good at the hard sciences. About 25% of their television time is devoted to high arts. High arts only occupies 3% of American television broadcast time. I'm not a fan of Russia, especially recently under the Putin regime, but their elementary art programs are very impressive.
Yeah. Can't say much for what my kids are doing in elementary school, so might want to take that. But I assume that you include literature as high art, so reading and writing. How do we stack up there?
Not that good. Not like we did when we were number 2 in 1970. India is actually the top country in the world in hours per week of reading. The average Indian adult spends about 10 hours and 42 minutes reading every week. That's almost a book a week. Yeah. Libraries are busy places in India with book lending and reading activities for children. Lots and lots of weekend programs and after-school programs. India also produces the most movies per capita almost double of Hollywood, but people still read there.
Yeah, that's crazy. We like books in our family, so I definitely plug that here. And I will plug the Libby app if anyone wants to listen to that. It's a library, like Audible, but all free. So definitely check that out.
Yeah.
But yes, I could definitely say a lot of things about my perception of America these days. But what are the current reading and writing trends in America from your point of view?
Well, sadly, we've fallen to number 23 worldwide in reading and writing. We're behind Turkey, Indonesia, Philippines, Egypt, and every European country. Like I said, we've never been first in the world in reading and writing, but we were in the top 5 until 1975. In terms of the command of the English language, we follow Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, and Norway. Yeah. So our high school test scores decline every year. Despite that, we're spending more per student than any other country.
Crazy. Guess it's time to move. But no. What do you attribute this decline to?
Well, there's a lot of people that blame immigration, and we have 3 times the percentage of immigrants entering the country now than we did in 1975. And that will skew the statistics on language skills. But in previous waves of immigration, like the early 1800s, when our immigrant population was at its highest, people and their children got up to speed very quickly. And I think that the reason between then and now, I don't think immigration is the problem. I think there were less distractions and more parental influence back then. I come from a family of immigrants, as we all do, but I remember, my grandparents. My grandfather had an 8th grade education, and my grandmother never attended school. And I'll tell you, they made sure that I did my homework, and they were very influential. There was no getting around doing my schoolwork, because they knew how important it was. And now kids just spend endless hours on their phone or playing video games, and we're rusting their brains.
Yeah.
So we need real education that you can touch and feel and participate in, not passive screen time.
Yeah, no, that's a real problem. It's an addiction for all of us to some degree.
Yeah, it is.
And, this conference that I was at, we talked a lot about social media because, we're all on it. And I know some people there are big TikTok influencers, and it just blows my mind. Like, I still don't fully understand TikTok, but I know that in, America, it looks very different than in India or China, because they actually push education through those channels, where in America, it's just a free for all and there's no limits. I think in India too, they're dealing with like teenage, kind of just different ways to limit the screen time. And so there's actually like, it just turns off or something. I don't really know how it works, but we don't have that here. So that's an issue. And I haven't done a deep dive into TikTok at all, but I just know some of those stats. Yeah, it just goes to show how things can get so skewed very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, we have this hands-off business mentality, and that's good because free enterprise is the driving economic engine of America. But there's something to be learned by other countries. When I was in Korea, I found out about this program, and this was, the last time I was there was 22 years ago. But anyway, their video games were pretty popular. There was a optional program that parents could opt into for their kids, mostly boys, who were spending way too much time playing video games. And what this meant was that the kids were at first enrolled in an after-school program, and they weren't allowed to touch any video games. And also, they were prohibited from playing any more than 1 hour of video games every week at home. But if that didn't work, the parents could recommend them to be taken to education camps. This sounds like a real prison thing, but it's not. It's a lot of fun. Kids just couldn't use screens, but they spent that extra time learning, but they also spent it swimming, playing soccer, learning how to play chess, being introduced into arts and musical instruments. And that has been an amazingly successful program in Korea to get kids off the addiction of video games and screen time. And, as our education results have declined, Korea is now number 2 in the world. And we started declining in 1970, and they started getting better. And they just have a really good program, and they spend a lot of energy and I'm sure money on education, and it works out for them.
Yeah, interesting. So supporting the arts in school can definitely change the outcome of all of this if we actually put the time and money into it.
Yeah. It starts at home, as you know. You have
Yeah.
two wonderful girls, and it's more than a full-time job.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have a story about a colleague of mine that found a way to reach students through art. In his case, it was music. And I taught at the same high school that he taught at. It was Watsonville in California. And if anybody knows that area, it's an underserved region. It's mainly agriculture, and 95% of my students were Spanish speaking. So let me tell you a story about a music teacher, and I'm going to refer to him as Mr. E at a high school in Watsonville where I taught photography. I knew Mr. E as a great jazz alto sax player and vocalist and educator, and he and I played gigs often. He's a real inspiration to me, and he knew how to inspire kids. When he moved from a teaching position in middle school, where his students prospered, to a high school with a failing music program, he was faced with some challenges. Academic results in this particular high school, Watsonville High, were low. And also, there was no interesting music program, and the arts had been largely defunded because they were so tight on money that they decided to pull arts and put it into these core science and math classes, which, of course, are important. Well, anyway, the principal at Watsonville High only cared about one thing, and that was to have the marching band play Stars and Stripes Forever while they formed the name of the school on the field during a football halftime. And the principal was from Michigan, and that's what schools did when he lived there and he was a kid. Two previous music teachers had left their jobs at Watsonville because of unrelenting pressure from that principal to do this.
Yeah.
And Mr. E knew that many of the students and their families from his time at the local middle school, he knew them, and he knew that there was a strong musical tradition in the community, which is predominantly Hispanic. And many of the kids played in marimba bands, were a tradition in Guatemala, in mariachi bands, which are popular in Mexico, and many of the Anglo kids played in garage rock bands. There were kids that were into rap and hip hop. And at school dances, kids that normally didn't associate with each other shared the dance floor. Music and dance were effective icebreakers. But, Mr. E had no shortage of kids interested in music, but none of them wanted to wear old, worn-out band uniforms and play outdated marches by John Philip Sousa. Well, Mr. E sent out the word that he was going to form lots of different ethnic bands, and he also wanted dancers in traditional and innovative costumes to perform to the music. And these were programs that worked really well for him in middle school. So the big performance was set to occur at halftime for the beginning of the big homecoming football game. And hundreds of kids came out of the woodwork to join in and to show off their stuff. But Mr. E had one stipulation. Nobody could take part in the performance if they had a current grade point average below 75%. So things changed quickly at the high school. Music classes became so popular that several sections filled and were forced to meet after school. And dancers were having glorious outfits made by their mothers and their aunts. And teachers of core subjects were swamped with requests for tutoring so the students could get above that 75% mark. So the activity surrounding the big music event had the school bubbling. So on the night of the football game, and you picture this, the stands are filled with dancers in costumes, and nervous musicians are holding their instruments, and they're anxious to play in front of their friends and family. It's a huge, huge outpouring of the community for this halftime. So when halftime began, a crew of kids ran out onto the field and they sprayed a big W onto the grass to meet the requirements. And one by one, each of the various bands stood somewhat in the confines of the crooked W and played their hearts out as dancers performed the steps to ethnic dances that their parents had taught them or modern moves that they had learned in dance class. And the finale was a hip-hop version of Stars and Stripes that Mr. E had to put together at the last minute. And every musician joined in, and every dancer dipped, twirled, and gyrated. The song was barely recognizable. And John Philip Sousa would probably have gone unconscious from the cacophony. But it was amazing. The entire show lasted 90 minutes, but nobody complained. And on Monday morning, Mr. E was asked to come into the principal's office where he faced an absolutely livid boss. And Mr. E was fired on the spot because he failed at at what the principal thought was appropriate halftime music. Well, when the word got out about Mr. E's dismissal, the school was shut down by crying students and angry parents. And these are parents that don't speak English. A lot of them, they don't normally go to school events, and certainly not parent-teacher conferences or anything. And the district stepped in and put the principal on temporary leave, and he didn't come back.
Wow.
By June of that year, the music program had grown to include 600 students, and that's about 28% of the entire student body.
Yeah.
Test scores for the school rose sharply because of Mr. E's insistence that kids must maintain a C+ grade point average to be in any one of the 14 bands that he had.
Yeah.
And in the following year, Mr. E raised the requirement, so kids had to have a B average. And I was, I saw this firsthand, and it was an amazing intervention, basically, by giving kids something that they really were motivated and proud to be part of, and it just spilled over into their studies. So statistics prove, that involvement in the arts acts as a general motivator for kids to improve in their studies. And when they get satisfaction from artistic pursuits, they improve their powers of concentration and confidence. And, it's a social thing, too. They make more friends.
That's really incredible. And I mean, it just goes to show the power of one person, too. If you just start in your home or your classroom, you can really make an influence, but you have to start somewhere. And I think we get bombarded with the idea of all the problems of the world, right? And we can't solve those, but just start with the person in front of you and look at the difference that he made.
Yeah, it was big.
Yeah. So you mentioned that in addition to teaching college level photography for over 40 years, which is amazing, you also taught high school photography and art. What did you learn from that experience?
A lot.
Sure.
If teachers are paying attention, they learn a ton of stuff from their students.
Yeah.
I've taught kids of all ages in summer school workshops, and I love to see them open up and interpret the world through the lens of their cameras. I only taught 1 year of high school photography, and that was at Watsonville High, where Mr. E had his remarkable success. Out of the 40 years of teaching, that year was the most gratifying one for me. Mr. E, he retired, but he and the video production teacher had paved the way for me and other teachers in the arts. And it was through the ROP program that I was hired, which is a regional occupational program. And so, they have dental hygiene, truck and car repair, welding, all that stuff. And the administration was really supportive of me. I had 105 students in 3 sections, 35 students each. And my class was in this program, which was very time intensive. And at that school, their ROP program was really good, especially agriculture, because they had 64 acres of land under cultivation. The ag classes had cattle, goats, llamas, chickens, and a robust veteran assisting program. It was really quite remarkable. So, the photography and the ag classes were kind of dumping grounds and an opportunity at the same time, because academically poor students, many of whom recently arrived from Central America, filled my classes. Less than half of my students spoke English fluently, and I had a Spanish-speaking translator for each of my classes. And I produced lectures and demonstrations, and my translators did voiceovers for these. And these were posted on YouTube for students to refer to. They didn't have to take notes in class. And I'll give you that website. I have about 70 lessons that still exist on YouTube, and they're handy for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, there was a vacant classroom next to mine, and I turned that into a commercial level photo studio, and kids shot and processed an assignment every Monday and Wednesday. And on Friday was a makeup day. So I had to grade typically 600 photographs a week from my students. But because they spent 5 hours on Monday, 5 hours on Wednesday, and 4 hours on Friday, it was very intensive. And my students really did well. And by the middle of the class, the year, I didn't have to have a translator because they learned all of the photography vocabulary. And those high school students learned at twice the speed of any college class I've ever had. And it was because they were really motivated and really interested, and it was an intensive program. And I teamed up with music instructors and students to, produce concerts and photo essays and all kinds of things. And it was a real great program there. And I've tried to bring that kind of thing into my college courses.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes me think of I guess I haven't thought of school this way, but it's like such a social experiment, right? Like you never know the students you're going to get, if they're going to be motivated or not. And here you have translators, there's so many variables at play, but you had such a great experience. So why did you leave Watsonville High?
That's a sad story.
Okay.
The leadership of the district changed, and the new board voted to shut down 75% of the ROP programs so they could have more funds for STEM courses.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about 6 or 7 years ago. And the result has been absolutely no improvement in core subject test scores.
Yeah.
Campus violence, which had virtually disappeared with with kids getting really involved in art and collaborating with after-school activities. The campus violence has tripled since they cut out the ROP program, and so has the dropout rate. And so clearly the move away from the arts has hurt the overall performance of the school academically, and I think more importantly, socially.
Yeah.
Because art is collaborative.
Yeah. I mean, I think in theory, these STEM classes sound good and they're pushed everywhere, but I haven't seen it in our elementary schools either of any good outcomes. And I don't feel like it's really engaging my kids. So I probably vouch with you that there hasn't been much good out of it.
Yeah, it's we can't abandon the stress that we put onto the sciences and language arts and stuff like that. But you get the engine started with subjects that kids can get excited about, and then they'll just spend more and more time, being happy with their efforts towards studying.
Mm-hmm.
And also, art promotes just basic mental health and well-being.
For sure. That's why there's adult coloring books, right? It's very soothing to
You have adult coloring books? I
don't have any, but they do exist for sure. No, I mean, it's interesting too. I mean, I have a 4th grader, and the only homework that she gets is a math sheet every night. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't like doing it. I mean, she's actually pretty good at math, but this is it. Where are all the projects that I had, and would stay up late doing? And I don't even get to partake in those as her parent now. So yeah, there's just not a lot of group projects or art projects that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Another aspect of this is what I call the blank sheet syndrome. And what I mean by this is, screens and video games and watching TV, it's very passive. Mm-hmm. You just sit there and you just take it in. Yeah. The only benefit that I could see to video games is that it does help memory and thematic mapping in your mind, because, you have to go through these tunnels and stuff like that. But other than that, just the twitch reflex of kids' thumbs playing the game is really all. And other than that, it's pretty passive. But the blank, having a blank sheet of paper and a box of crayons or your watercolors or whatever, there's no path for a young artist to follow. You have to have a strategic plan in order to draw something. And it's hard at first, of course, but it is so liberating when you can create something on a blank sheet of paper. And it's something that TV and video games and your cell phone and stuff, it doesn't allow you to do, because it's capturing all your attention. And it's basically tying your hands as far as creativity goes. So that part is really important for brain development. It really is.
Well, there's so much freedom in that too, because you get to choose. And so much of schooling is follow these rules, get this outcome. You know, it's then you get the grade. But with art, anything is possible.
It is. And it's a nice departure from a lot of the stuff that kids have to learn. It frees them up. And like I say, it's just a it's a vacation in some ways,
Yeah.
which is important. We all need a vacation, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I watch TV, is to tune out from like the chores that I'm responsible for,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
but it's like, I
Yeah,
don't want to do that every day. We still have responsibilities and dreams to chase. So,
yeah.
well, this has all been amazing. I appreciate all of this insight. In summary, though, what would you like to leave us with?
Well, I have 6 important facts to leave with you.
Great.
They sum up what we've talked about. And number one is that creativity is essential to the development of young people. And art education encourages young people to explore their imagination and develop their abilities to think and act in innovative ways. And it gives them a way to express themselves and realize how unique they are.
Mm-hmm.
The number 2 point is that art helps young people to develop fine motor skills that go beyond participation in sports. These skills are essential to eye-hand coordination for drawing, typing, and visual communications. So working with a variety of materials of different textures and colors, it builds important pathways in developing brains that will serve people for a lifetime. The number 3 thing, it's kind of supports these first 2.
Mm-hmm.
The problem-solving benefit gained from music, drawing, photography, sculpture, ceramics, dancing, and all the other creative activities is well established by endless research. Music in particular builds a mental mapping skill that helps in mathematics, memory, chemistry, and it cannot be achieved with any other course of study. So, that's why art fits neatly into the building of young brains. It really does. Number 4, the self-expression of anybody is at the core of art education. We all need to express ourselves. And if you haven't drawn a picture lately, you should. Just take your kids' crayons and stuff and just spend 1 hour doing it with them. The trial and error process promotes critical thinking, concentration, and confidence. You may not think your drawings are very good, but they're going to be fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
Number 5 is the cultural awareness, which is important for all of us. And art studies includes exposure to a wide palette of visual, audio, and conceptual sources. And that involves art history, which we all benefit from. So the final one is that it increases self-esteem. Art makes socialization easier and less stressful. No matter what art you're pursuing or where the art is taking place, whether it's in prisons, schools, or elder care facilities, the results are dramatic. People gain power of concentration and they enjoy what they're doing, and it makes them more receptive to learning. Yeah. And that's why arts are so important.
Yeah. I mean, I love all this information that you gave us today. And I think the call to action that I'm hearing is really just, to go give my kids more pieces of blank paper to go draw with and to get involved with them. Because I'm sure, my mind could be stimulated in the same way and I might feel less stressed as well.
Yeah.
And I think also just all the background that you gave, just encourages us as parents to not only support our kids in advocating for the arts education, but also just seeking more opportunities for them to get involved, whether that's, in school or in summer camps or elsewhere, just to get this back, in their lives and stimulating their brains. So thank you.
Yeah.
Where can my audience find you?
Well, I have a website. It is luhnphoto.com. It's my last name, Luhn photo, PHOTO, no spaces, luhnphoto.com. I've got about, there's got to be 65 photo lessons on there.
That's awesome.
And, there's videos of my band and all kinds of interesting stuff. So it's an entertaining website.
Yeah. And educational, it sounds like. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure.
If Jeffery Jay Luhn struck a chord with you, go check out the links in the show notes to learn more about him. And like I mentioned in the beginning, if you're enjoying PG-ish, please share this episode with a friend so that more parents can grow alongside their kiddos. See you next time.